Hey everyone, so today we're going to be doing our board work on market failures. This is one of the most interesting modules to me, and I think it'll be interesting to you as well, and you can really tell a story here. So we're really going to be talking about externalities today, and that's when there are both negative externalities and positive externalities, and these are considered market failures because what it's basically saying is that the free market is not providing the correct amount of quantity at the correct price for this particular good. And it could be a positive externality, we're going to talk about public education, or it could be a negative externality, we're going to talk about pollution, maybe chemical pollution or something like that. And there are lots of different externalities. So it's important to break this down. Now these look like supply and demand graphs, and they are. But you should also realize that sort of demand, when you're talking about externalities, can also be equal to something called marginal private benefit, or just marginal benefit. And then the supply is going to be equal to the marginal private cost, or the marginal cost, which you should have heard before. Okay? So we have demand and supply. Okay? So if we start over here with the negative externality, basically this is the quantity of the free market and the price at the free market. And this equilibrium is the amount of chemicals that are being produced by the free market at that particular price. Well, this is the marginal private cost. This is the cost for this chemical company to produce its good. Okay, and they use that to determine how much to produce. And this is the marginal private benefit that we get from having chemicals in our lives. We use chemicals to clean things. We use chemicals for tons of things, right? Carpets, etc. But I'm putting down here that it's also the marginal social benefit. And what I mean by that is there's not additional social benefits that we have not perceived from having chemicals around us. We use them and we get benefit from them, but there's not an additional benefit that is not factored into the price, right? However, there is an additional cost that we have not calculated in, and that cost is pollution, right? So there is, well, this is the marginal private cost for the chemical company. There is a cost to society, and so this is marginal social cost, and that cost is significantly higher because chemicals create pollution. We have to clean it up. We're still not necessarily aware of all of the repercussions of having chemicals in our environment with regards to our health, etc. But we know that they are higher. So what we can see here is that at the quantity of the free market, the actual costs are significantly higher, okay? So what that means is that the free market is overproducing chemicals because they have not factored in this additional cost, okay? So you can see that at the free market quantity, the costs are significantly higher. So this quantity is where we want to be, and we're going to put this down here as QSO, the quantity, the socially optimal quantity. Okay, I'm going to put that socially optimal. Okay, that's the quantity that we want to be producing, and it should be much more expensive to produce chemicals and to buy chemicals because of this added cost that's not factored in, right? Well, there's some interesting things here. Number one, when you're looking at this, it looks like supply should be decreased, but that also looks like a tax, right? So let's talk about that for a second. So there's all these additional costs that have not been factored in, and there is this box right here, which is, I'm just going to tell you, this is deadweight loss. Now, you've seen this term before when we have a tax, right? But in that particular instance, the the tax created the deadweight loss. We had a free market and then we taxed something and it took people out of the market. Well, in this situation, it's the exact opposite. There are too many people purchasing chemicals at too low a price, and so there are people in the market that should not be there. Okay? And so deadweight loss works both ways. It can either be created by taking people out of the market who should be there, or it can exist because too many people are in the market and we have to figure out a way to get them out, right? So in this particular case, there are all these people purchasing these chemicals because they're priced too cheaply who would not be there if it was more expensive. So the way to solve this, to get us to the quantity socially optimal and the quantity and the price socially optimal price, is to create a tax. So if we begin a per unit tax, what would happen is all of this deadweight loss would disappear and you would have a much higher price and a much lower quantity produced, and you would be at the socially optimal. So it would remove the deadweight loss, which is kind of interesting. So let's jump over here, because not all externalities are negative. Public education. Why is public education a positive externality? Well, you guys are paying for your education right now. I paid for my education. Lots of people are paying for their education. But there are added benefits to having an educated society. People are more productive, not just for themselves, but for everybody else. We get more technological innovation. The list could go on forever, but society gets these additional benefits beyond the amount that you pay for your education. You get a private benefit. You get a better job, but I get a benefit too from having these people go to institutions of higher learning and discovering things that I can later use, right? So there's an additional benefit, and we're going to talk about that. So in this particular case, this is the marginal benefit, private marginal benefit of you getting your education, right? You paid a price for your education, you got a certain amount of education for that price, and that is your marginal private benefit. That is your demand for education. That's D and a P. Okay? Now, this is both the marginal private cost and the marginal social cost. This is the supply, and that's because the cost of running a university or a college, all those costs are factored in. There are not additional costs that we haven't factored in to society. So the marginal social cost actually equals the marginal private cost. Not really that important. But there is an additional benefit that we talked about, right? So the additional benefit is the marginal social benefit, right? The marginal social benefit. Well, what is this saying exactly? What it's saying is that the quantity of public education that we want to see for society is actually much higher, right? Because there are all these benefits that are not being calculated in. We want to see more people getting more education, right? More quantity. Well, when you increase the demand for something, if this is the free market, this is the free market, the price would be significantly higher, right? So again, there is deadweight loss. It's in a different place now. You can see that there's this added benefit that is not being calculated. So the deadweight loss is right here. I'm just going to put a big deadweight loss here and some lines around it. Okay. So again, these are people who are not getting the education, the amount of education that we want to see, right? So how do we, again, get rid of that deadweight loss and get us up to the socially optimal quantity of education? Well, one way to do this is to subsidize, because we are not producing enough, right? So we would actually call this under allocation. And in this particular instance, it's over allocation. right? We're over-allocating to the market chemicals, and we're under-allocating. See if that's still running. Yeah. Under-allocating education, right? So one way to do this is a per unit subsidy. So we subsidize public education in order to get that quantity higher, okay? And so that's a positive externality. If this was vaccines, you know, we as a government pay for those vaccines and give them away for free and make sure that the company gets that extra money. In this sense, you know, we provide subsidized loans and grants in order to get that amount up. So hopefully you can get a better picture of, you know, how this idea of externalities works. And I really like this because this really can tell a story about how you can use the government to sort of get closer to what we think is socially optimal, right? By either taxing, subsidizing, or setting price floors and price ceilings, which we could also do in this situation. All right, hope this helps.